as a black man, I have a complicated relationship with the flag. And as a gay man, I have a complicated relationship with the Bible. Just because I have a complicated relationship with the flag, it doesn't mean that I'm not a patriot. It doesn't mean that I don't love my country. So I have that same feeling about God. Your God is a big boss on top of you that's judging you. That's not my interpretation of God. And because you have a wrong thinking about what the Bible says or what scripture says or what religion is or what God is, doesn't mean that I have to adopt that same thing.
Okay, I love this guest. This is an award winning broadcast journalist. He has a fire in his belly. He has a passion unlike anyone else. He is articulate. He is authentic. He is brilliant. I love this guy. If you haven't seen him, it's not too late to start. My guest is Don Lemon. And here we go. Welcome to the Art of Excellence. In the words of Aristotle, excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. I am your host, Glenn Zweig. Join me now as I dive into the lives and careers of world-class entrepreneurs, athletes, entertainers, scientists, thought leaders, and explorers to uncover the ingredients to their extraordinary accomplishments. My guest today is Don Lemon. Don spent 3 decades on local and national TV, a trusted voice after the Sandy Hook massacre in war-torn Eastern Europe and during the riots of 2020. Anchoring Don Lemon Tonight on CNN for 8 years, he was known for hard-hitting interviews with public officials and compassionate dialogue with everyday people. The Don Lemon Show is now streaming on all platforms. He's the author of several best-selling books, including his most recent one titled, I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. Don, sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. It's really my pleasure being on. How are you?
I'm good. Pleasure is all mine. And I always try to think about how I want to start these things. And I now know you're jumping on telling me that you just finished a streaming of your own show. Is that what you're doing?
I did. That's why you see the logo in my background for those of you who are watching. Are you a video as well?
Well, audio, but I would like to reserve the right to maybe do video. I haven't quite gone that far yet. So here's where I want to start. Given that you are one of the great broadcast journalists out there, what does it feel like being on the other side of the mic?
Oh, you mean getting asked
Yeah,
questions
yeah.
um, instead of asking them?
Because you lose control, right? I've got the control. I know where this is sort of going.
Not really. There's always a way to answer a question. If you noticed, I actually got to the first 2 questions in. I said, "How are you?" And then I said, "Are you on video?" So you don't even know. So no,
Uh,
there's always a way to answer the question. So yeah, I mean, it's your show. Of course, you have more. You can cut the mic, or you can, cut it out or edit it. But how does it feel? It's a little bit different. But I have done books before. My book before this one was #1 New York Times bestseller. So I had to do a lot of interviews, and it was all Glenn during COVID. So I just sat in front of my computer, for hours and hours and hours. So, it's different. Sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable. You want to say move on sometimes as an interviewer, you have an instinct about, okay, we have exhausted the subject. But I think I'm just patient, and it's not my show, it's your show. So I'll go wherever you want to go. And if I want to try to steer the conversation to a different place, and I know how to do that.
well, Don, I view you as a very high integrity journalist.
Thank you.
And you seem to have this voracious appetite for knowledge, for information, for the truth. So how do you keep up with it all? In a world of AI and fake news and everything, how do you figure out how to separate fact from fiction and where to get reliable sourcing?
I have because I think you have to go everywhere. Look, my media diet is quite diverse now, even more diverse than when I was working at CNN. Because I sort of got fed everything, and I don't mean as a way of, it's not a way of trying to steer the news in a certain direction, but my producers would send me things, and the network had we'd have an editorial call, and they'd say these are the big stories today, and and so you would do that thing, right? You work for Company A. You do things the way Company A does it. You work for Company B, you do the way Company B does it. So, I did not have to consume as much because I was getting factual information just coming at me daily just because of what I did. Now it's me. I am my producer, although I have producers, but I'm an entrepreneur now. So I have to make sure doubly so. I don't have a giant, corporate engine behind me taking care of some of those things. So my media diet is quite diverse and I read everything and I do a lot of my own fact checking. And I go into spaces that people wouldn't normally go into. I listen to I do listen to conservative podcasts. The Wall Street Journal, which is considered conservative. I don't tend to delve into the entire Wall Street Journal, but I'll look at their editorial page and I'll see how they're covering things. Same thing with the New York Times or the Washington Post. So you have to teach yourself. I think everyone does, but I've taught myself to become even more media literate, not illiterate, but literate than I was even working in corporate media.
Hmm.
It's still a lot to keep up with. When you're doing it for a long time, when I was sitting behind that anchor desk every day, it was hard and not hard because you're like an athlete, right? You get to know the game and you all of a sudden you get, it's every day I was covering because I was into it. And so you would know things. Yeah, I tell you what, look, when I would watch the folks on broadcast media do a town hall or a debate, I was always shocked by what they didn't follow up on or they didn't fact check on, simply because they were not doing it every single day. I was
Hmm.
doing it every single day for 2 hours. So if someone said something that wasn't true, I would be immediately, that's not true. And this is how I know it's not true because blah, 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 blah. But the folks who are like working in broadcast television, like doing a 30-minute broadcast tonight, which is really probably about 10 minutes of copy, if that much, probably less than that, or doing morning shows, which is mostly a promotion vehicle, right, for
Hmm.
books, shows, and whatever. And so I was always sort of stunned by that. So after a while, you just sort of have an idea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this isn't a political podcast, but we are weeks away from the election.
Yes,
So
sir.
let me just quickly touch on it. I've heard you say that you are an independent. You don't align yourself with either political party. So curious if that's still the case. And I don't know if, I guess, if it is the case, if it's because you don't want to alienate half your audience or you don't really have values and political ideology that more closely aligns with one party or the other. Because from the outside looking in, it does seem to me that you lean more toward one side, but just would love your thoughts there.
So it's not that I don't have values that align with one political party or another. I don't, honestly, because I have conservative leanings and I have some liberal leanings, some not so conservative leanings. And I think most Americans are that way. Look, I went to college and I didn't pledge a fraternity because I don't really like being part of a club. That's just not my thing. I lean one way only now because of what is happening on one side of our political spectrum, right? One of the two major parties in this country. And I think one of the two major parties has lost its way in a big way. And I think the other party just is doing sort of the same thing. They're just not great at some things, but they do care about democracy and they do believe in free and fair elections. And they don't in this sort of unusual and extraordinary sense demonize their opponents. So I believe at this point, the Republican Party, which I was a member of at one point, I believe that it's been a while, it's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that they've lost their way. I think they've become the MAGA party, the party of Donald Trump. And I don't believe Donald Trump really has any strong ideological core beliefs except for himself and power and to stay out of jail. And now I can say that after having done my own research, after having, and just because of the facts of the things. So as I tell people and now that I could not say when I was on in corporate media, is that when people ask me who I support, I tell them I support democracy. And in this particular election, democracy is supported by Kamala Harris. I don't support her just because she's a Democrat. I support her because there are only two viable candidates in this race. One is Kamala Harris, the other is Donald Trump. I believe on the other side of a Kamala Harris administration or term, we will still have an intact democracy, one that does not attack our institutions. On the other side of a Donald Trump administration, another Donald Trump term, I'm not so sure that that would happen, and I don't want to take my chances of that. And also, quite frankly, I don't believe that this is a liberal or a conservative belief. This is a human belief. I really do care about a woman's right to be able to do with her body what she and her doctor have figured out what's best for her medically. And so there's not one law that tells a man what he can do with his reproductive organs or his body that I know of. And so I believe once you start taking that right from any group, right from any group or any demographic, then the next group or demographic they're going to come from is you. And so that's how I feel at this particular time. And I think journalists can be, as long as you're transparent about that, I think that's okay to do as a journalist because all you have to do is say, this is what I believe, and this is the angle that I'm coming from. This is the lens that I view life and politics and the world from. And as long as you're transparent about it, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want to go back to the early days of Don, if I could.
Oof.
I believe you grew up in a house full of women. Is that correct?
I did.
But your biological dad died when you were 9 years old.
Yes.
So that would be old enough to have had some kind of relationship with him, I think.
Yes, I had relationships with.
So what kind of influence did he have on you?
Well, I had a relationship, but just remember 2 years, not even 2 years, about a year and a half or a little bit. My stepdad came in the picture, and he was a great role model and a great male figure in my life. So it's not like I grew up without a male presence or a father in the house. So
Mm,
that's a misconception.
okay.
But my dad, my father, I should say, there was always a presence there that he was aware that he was my father and treated me as such as his son, but I wasn't aware of it until, my sisters told me, that he was my dad because I was thinking that their father was my father. And so then I became aware of it. And once I became aware of it, we bonded even more. And so, my memories of my dad was going fishing or going to the spa with him, to the health club, like the old days with the old iron equipment. And
Hmm.
then, you would go, it was like a Turkish bath and you'd go and they beat you with stuff. And so I would go with him to do that. I would go fishing with him. I would go camping with him. I would just hang out at his office with him, and I would love to sit in his big leather chair. So I have all these great vacations with my dad. So I had all of my father, I have great memories. And then my mom remarried about 2 years later, and the same thing. Very aware that I needed a father figure in my life, and my stepdad was just as involved as my real father, if not more, because my real dad was an attorney and had very little time. I should say not very little, but limited time that he could spend with us. But every time he did, it was meaningful.
Mm.
Trip, vacation, fishing, camping, something like that, concerts or something like that. But my stepdad retired when I was in high school, and I got to spend a lot more time with him. So
Hmm. Well, this current book is all about religion.
not all about religion. It's all about
It's not all about religion, but
it's about the world. Yeah,
it's about the world. But certainly, religion is a big theme throughout the book. And
exactly.
you were talking about how you would relish going to church as a kid. All the songs and rituals, and was curious how much of that, as a child, was about a spiritual experience for you, like some actual feeling you had toward God, or was it more just being mesmerized, captivated by all the pomp and circumstance?
The pageantry of it all. I think that
Mm-hmm.
was the biggest thing. Because when you're a child, you love all those things. Look, I relished some of it, but not all of it. I didn't like sitting in church for hours as a Baptist. I liked that it was sort of truncated program of a Catholic church, right? It's like we're here for 30 minutes and that's it, and we're getting out. I was like, woohoo, why can't we do that in my Baptist church? But listen, for me growing up, the Christianity and the Bible and being a Protestant and then going to a Catholic school, that like that was a big theme in my life. So I was immersed in that, and that was all I knew. So I didn't go to a public school or secular or whatever you want to call it. And so I had a different experience with the Bible, God, scripture, religion than most of my counterparts, right? My cousins and my sisters who, didn't go to a Catholic school. My sister did for a while, but for the most part, they had public school education. So, I enjoyed the singing. I enjoyed the sermons sometimes. I enjoyed watching the folks, get the spirit in my Baptist church on the Holy Ghost would just overtake them. And,
Mm.
as I write about it in the book, and, we would see if their wigs or their hair pieces or, whatever they had in their hair would fall off. And it was just, that sort of thing it was like a little story every Sunday. What were we going to see in church? And so I
Mm.
did like that. And for a while, I believed that I might, for a minute, that I might somehow become a man of the cloth if it was not, someone involved deeply in the church, perhaps a priest. And then that I quickly dispel, that, disabuse myself of that idea, um, as I grew older and matured.
Yeah. Well, it was gut wrenching, hearing you say as a child, or at least reflecting back, probably thinking that you felt this way. Please, Lord, make me be not gay.
Mhm.
Don't make me gay. And I take it you just wanted to fit in and be accepted like everyone else. And of course, being gay was an abomination in the eyes of the church. Was that traumatizing as a kid?
It was traumatizing as a kid, but I mean, what was more traumatizing, I believe, was even just life, day-to-day life and interacting with people and, hearing how people talked about other people in the community who were back then we didn't call them part of the LGBTQ community. We called
Mm-hmm.
them, did we say gay? I don't remember if that was even a term that we talked about. A man was a sissy
Yeah.
or a woman. Do we even say lesbian? I mean, there were words. I'll
They
just
were all derogatory words, I'm sure, back
they
then.
would call them a bull dyke or a bull dagger, right? You know what I mean? Or they call guys fags or sissies or punks or funny, funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're funny. And so that part was more traumatizing, I believe, than the God part. But I think there was a psychological, it was traumatic psychologically to hear that in the eyes of God, which, everyone was striving to be closer to their maker, that I was somehow an abomination, as the Bible would tell me. Or, not as the Bible would tell me, but as their interpretation of the Bible or scriptures would say. So I thought that, when I got baptized and if I prayed hard enough and if I was born again, that, that God, if I prayed hard enough and I was diligent and faithful enough, that God would take that desire away from me. And even then, I didn't really know what it was. It wasn't, when you're young, it's not sexual. Maybe you have crushes on boys the way that, you know, you have crushes on girls or
Mm-hmm.
that kind of. But I knew, since I can remember, I've known. It's magical thinking. And then as you get older and you mature and you start using critical thinking, you realize that, okay, that's not exactly how it works. It's kind of like Santa Claus, right? Once you start developing critical thinking, you go, okay, maybe maybe Santa's not what I thought, or maybe Santa's not who I thought Santa was or is.
Well, and this is maybe going to the next thing I wanted to touch upon, which is it. Even having read the book, which by the way, I love the book.
Thank you.
I'm still struggling, Don, a little bit. Given all the anti-gay rhetoric, this isn't just, yes, we can go back in time, but I don't know that it's all that dramatically different today, unfortunately. Given all the anti-gay, anti-LGBT rhetoric emanating from the Christian leadership, not all of it, but certainly some of it, why did you back then, and why do you to this day want to cling on so tightly to a community who doesn't really want to accept and embrace you for who you are? Why is religion so important?
I don't really, I'm not embracing a community. I'm not embracing religion. What I am is I'm embracing God. The book is called I Once Was Lost, which is
Mm-hmm.
from Amazing Grace. My search for God in America. It's not my search for religion or my search for Christianity or my search for Catholicism or my search for Protestantism or Judaism. It's my search for God in America. And it is for what the question that you just posed. That is the reason that I don't attend a church. I don't actively attend a church. Will I go to church? Sure. But that is the reason why I don't. So I have chosen to believe in my God and to read and interpret the scriptures in the way that I believe that they should be read and interpreted. I believe that the Bible is not a book of fact. It's a library of allegory, mythology, and parables, and it's a lesson on life and how you should treat people. It is not a book of judgment on how you judge your neighbors. As a matter of fact, it says the exact opposite. That's the exact opposite of what you should do. So I don't want someone else's belief or bad interpretation or wrong interpretation of the scriptures to push me away from the God who I know loves me and takes care and takes care of me and who has taken care of me for my entire life. Does that answer your question?
It answers the question. I mean, and I saw that there's an intellectual decoupling, if you will, of God from the institution of religion, the community that typically surrounds it. And so because it sounds like you still go to church. So you still dip your toes in a community that has a lot of its own bias interpretation of it. I mean, you sort of found something that has meaning to you, and that's all that matters. I just sort of looked at it and I'm like, man, just something that even though it's all interpretation, that interpretation was so harsh and remains so harsh that I guess you have to be comfortable being, in your own personal community with God to some extent, if that makes sense.
It seems contradictory, but let me explain it this way. As a black man, I have a complicated relationship with the flag.
Mm-hmm.
And as a gay man, I have a complicated relationship with the Bible. And I think that kind of explains it. So, but just because I have a complicated relationship with the flag, it doesn't mean that I'm not a patriot. It doesn't mean that I don't love my country. It means that I have a right to be able to criticize it and to question it, just as I do with religion, or to believe in it. So I believe in all of the things that that flag should stand for, even though that flag has not always embraced me, right? And people who use the flag, right, in a way that it should. And so I write about that relationship. So just because others interpret what the flag means,
Mm-hmm.
means in the wrong way, it doesn't mean that I should not have love for my country. So I don't believe in performative patriotism, which is one must stand and put their hand over the heart when you're saying the national anthem, singing the national anthem, or you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance. You don't really have to do any of that. That's what being a true patriot is realizing that if someone chooses not to stand for the national anthem, that is what America is about. That's their right. You may not like it. I may not like it, but you as an American have the right. You don't have to stand. You can kneel if you want. You can criticize your country. As a matter of fact, I think everyone should, right? That means that anytime you love someone, you have some constructive criticism for them. So I have that same feeling about God. Your God is a big boss on top of you that's judging you. That's not my interpretation of God. And because you have a wrong thinking about what the Bible says or what scripture says or what religion is or what God is, doesn't mean that I have to adopt that same thing. And so I don't. So, I think I feel this very similarly about the flag and about my country as I do about scripture and God and religion.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Thank you. I like it. I like the interpretation. High school.
Ooh.
You were elected senior class president.
If I could turn back time and go back to high school.
Well, that's what we're doing right now.
Okay.
I'm here to do. So, were you elected class president because you were the popular kid, or more like the kid everyone admired and respected, but didn't necessarily hang with socially?
I was the kid whose personality could not be denied,
Hmm.
even if you didn't like me, even from the jocks, even from the women, even from the people who were the racists there. You couldn't deny my personality, and I sort of got along with everyone. So there was a certain popularity to it, but I wasn't like, the high school popular jock type. I
Hmm.
was just a guy who's like, oh my God, you can't help but like that Don Lemon, right? And I also think it was in a weird way, it was, it was the campaign that I ran. And so, everyone ran a campaign, and the guy who was the most popular thought that he could win. It's very much like the 2020 election, kind of.
Hmm.
This guy was he was a sort of a legacy. He was known in the town. His brothers and friends were all jocks, and they all lived in the same neighborhood, and they felt that they owned this town that our high school was in. And so I said, you know what, I got to get out the campaign. I have to, and so get out and campaign. So I got like a big sheet, and I put, I spray painted it and with lemons, vote for Don Lemon, blah, blah, and I put it all around, and I had posters. And I would go to the grocery store, and I made my mom, I'm like, Mom, I need some money. You got to help me. You got to help me. And I got these giant lemons. I don't know if you've ever seen the oversized lemons and even small ones. And I took a Sharpie and I wrote vote for Don Lemon, and I handed out actual lemon at school for people to vote for me. And I won. And it was so weird when they announced it over the intercom. I didn't hear it. And I was like, I did not hear it. And I actually prayed to win, which was weird. I prayed. And I won, and I didn't hear it. And everyone's like, "Oh my God, congratulations!" I'm like, "What? What? What?" And they said, "You won." I'm like, "Are you serious?" And they said, "Yes." I didn't hear it. It was kind of out of body. So that's what I did. I think I was,
Hmm.
sort of a natural campaigner, and I just think that, how could you not like me? I don't dislike anyone. I try to meet people where they are, and it's the same thing when I was in high school. I've always had that, and even before, I've always had that sort of attitude and sensibility about me.
Hmm. I interviewed Al Roker a few years back. I don't know if you know Al or not.
I do know Al.
His father gave him this advice as he was setting out in the world. I think it was like leaving high school, going to the next stage of his life. He said, Al, you're a black kid. If you want to be successful, you have to work twice as hard and be twice as good as the kid next to you. He took that advice to heart. Did you ever get any kind of advice like that?
Of course. And I knew that. And look, I still have to do that. And I had to do that when I worked at CNN. I had to do that when I worked at NBC. I had to do that when I worked, in in human resources at, years ago when I was in college. I had to do that when I was in local news. I write about not having finished college when I moved to New York and leaving LSU because my journalism teacher told me that I would never make it as a journalist. And there were people in my class who I knew just objectively were not as talented as I was.
Hmm.
And so I left Louisiana because of the racism and because I needed to move to New York to be who I am. I had to be, I knew that I was gay, and I said, I gotta get out of here because I will always be constrained, and I won't be able to live my full life or the life that I think I deserve. I know that I deserve. And so I left. And when people started to realize the sort of natural ability I had to be in a newsroom and to write and to produce stories and be in front of a camera, they were like, "My God, you're a natural. Like, well, we would put you on TV and blah blah blah." And I said, "I don't have my degree yet." And they go, "Oh, you don't need it in this business. Look, Lester Holt doesn't have a degree, and Brian Williams doesn't have a degree, and this person doesn't have a degree.
Hmm.
All these people," and they would tell me, and I'm like, "No, I can't do that. I can't be that guy because I think they said Lester. I think, but Lester Holt was back
Hmm.
then at MSNBC or and he was perhaps it wasn't Lester then. But I know it was Brian Williams and others that they would tell me. And I said, well, I can't do that. I have to have this paper because I don't want people telling me that I can't do something because I don't have this piece of paper that I need. And so I went to school and I would work full time. Sometimes I would work full time, Glenn, and I would also go to school full time. And I would get them to move my schedule around if they needed me. And I would say, well, let me know where you need me the most. If you want me to work a day shift or a night shift, because if I work a day shift, then I'm going to go to college at night. And if I work a night shift, then I'm going to go to college during the day.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I've always outworked everyone, no
Hmm.
matter where I was. And so even my first full-time on camera reporting an anchor position was in Birmingham, Alabama. And I was a weekend anchor. So I would anchor the morning show, then I'd go home and take a break. Or if I had to go out and report, I would do it. And then I'd come back and I'd anchor the evening show on the weekend. And then I would report during the week. Or if they needed me during the week, I'd come in on my days off. And I was just telling someone, today we were talking about working, and my producer said, I don't ever remember really getting this day off, and everybody's off. No one's in the office today. I'm the only one here. And I said, you know what? About the first 10 years I was at CNN, I didn't take a vacation. I think I took a vacation once, and I realized, what am I doing? I need to be on the air. I think it was the first year I started in like September or October, late August, September, October. And I remember I took Christmas off. And I remember like seeing someone sitting in my chair, and I was like, why am I doing that? Why am I allowing myself to be at home? I need to be there building who I am and building my position there. And then after that, I rarely, if ever, took a vacation.
Hmm.
There were years that I did not take one day off.
Yeah.
So I've always felt that I had to work harder, and eventually it did pay off. That's the advice that I give to students when I speak to them. Don't worry about being, the only black woman or the only black man, because students would come up to me and ask me, how do I make it as a strong black woman? How do I make it as a black man? How do I make it as a gay person? How do I make it as a woman? I said, don't worry about those things. Just worry about being excellent and
Hmm.
let the folks like me worry about those things.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, I knew that and I got that. I think every black kid, especially male, is given that lesson along with the lesson about what to do when you're stopped by the police. I think
Yeah.
it's universal for
Yeah.
black.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming for some period of time, Don, you're having to work the beat with local TV affiliates and have a weekend spot here and there and reporting the news and events. And I imagine a lot of it's sort of just fact reporting, not a lot of space to show your personality. So was there a moment or maybe a sequence of events that allowed you to find your voice, that voice you talked about that you had back in high school, to allow that to shine on TV?
Well, yes, look, I had, every sort of, I think, setback or shortcoming that you think you have is usually a gift. You just have to figure out what that gift is and how to use it. So, it took me longer to finish college. I didn't have a degree because I dropped out and I left, right? And to some part, I did not take it as seriously as I should have. I remember arriving in New York in the newsroom and working there, and everyone just seemed so much more confident than me, and kind of in a way entitled because they had all grown up there. They went to NYU or to Boston College or some Ivy League school, and or their parents knew someone, or they were the legacy of such and such, or they had, it was just like that was their life. And for me, I had never experienced anything like that. And so I realized that what I had going for me was that I had this drive that they didn't have, that they sort of said, oh, of course, my dad is a legacy and my dad is such and such, and I'm going to get
Mm-hmm.
this thing. I mean, kids would say that, and or they were not conscious of it and just talked to the bosses about such and such. Oh my God, your dad is this and you're that. They were very aware of that. And so I thought that, I knew then that I had a drive that they didn't have, which you think is a disadvantage and it's an advantage. I also had a personality that they didn't have. And so in the beginning, I did not realize it as much as when I got on camera. And so the other advantage I had was being able to work at the station and while I was going to school, like having the work experience as I was going to school in tandem was actually very helpful.
Mhm.
So and when I was in the, I did TV radio. I would be in a writing class and they would say, we need you to write an introduction for this news story. And they would give a scenario. I was writing every day for for news. So people would write things and I would say, I would just, I knew how to write in news form, but also make it conversational. And so the first time, like I would give my writing, I would write it and the professor would go, holy crap, this is great. And I was like, yeah, because every night I'm writing for the 10 o'clock news and for John Rowland, who was just a stickler on, writing. He would yell at me and say, "Listen, get in here." And I'd go, oh my God. And all the writers at the desk at Channel 5 would look around and go, oh boy. And yeah, I don't envy you, is what they were saying. And I would go in and he goes, who would write this? Why would you write it that way? What would you say? So let me come up with a scenario. Let's just say that there was a person who got, I don't know, hit by a cab, just making, and hopefully no one, I don't want anybody to get hit by a cab. And, people would write, today, such and such got hit by a cab and whatever. And he goes, is that how you would say it? And I'd say, no. And he goes, well, how would you say it? How would you say, if you were talking to your friend, how would you say that? And I said, I would say, oh my gosh, did you see the guy who got hit by the cab at 92nd and First? And he would say, write that.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? You're right. And I would say, if you were at 92nd and First today, you saw this person got hit by a cab. It was a horrible scene. It happened about noon at such and such. And then you can go into that. And I was like, wow, he turned me into a writer because I was actively getting the experience and then also getting the training for it at the same time. Okay, so I took that same thing into when I was when as I was building my tape working for Channel 5 because I was the assignment editor, and so the crews owed me favors, right? I would
Yeah.
say, "Look, you can don't take a lunch today. If I did them a no lunch, which means they got a couple more dollars
Hmm.
in their thing, or if I let them, I say, hey, you can leave. You can go home early or whatever. And they'd be, oh, you're great. So when I would go to them and say, hey, can you shoot a stand up for me? They would say, okay, great. Yeah, of course I can. Okay. So long story short, so then in school, I'd have to do the same thing. And I realized the same thing in my writing that John Rowland was teaching me in the newsroom was the same sort of approach that I had on the air in front of the camera. All right, so then I got a job before I finished school, and I had to finish my last semester. This was by, sort of by mail because there was no internet wasn't big then. So I went to the school and I said, I need to finish. I have a job. Most people want to graduate and then get a job, but I have a legit job. What can we do? And they said, you finish school this way. So then I was in front of the camera, and then I realized all of this experience that I got, that the only way that I was going to stand out is if I relied upon my personality and not try to be a perfect robot and just to be Don Lemon. And so I think I realized on camera during that first job when everyone was busy trying to be a reporter and an anchor,
Hmm.
I was just being me in front of the camera. And that carried me through. That made me successful. I was in Birmingham barely 10 months when I got noticed by something. I was like, this kid is very natural. And so that was the thing where I said I left Louisiana because it was obvious to me that I was more talented and more comfortable in front of the camera than all of the students at LSU in my class. Same thing when I got to Brooklyn College. And so, yes, I realized it in my very first job where if I wasn't busy trying to be an anchor man, that if I flubbed something or screwed something up, that I didn't have to go out of character and then back into character in order to fix it. So if I flubbed a word, I would just say, I'm sorry, scratch that. What I meant is such and such. And it wasn't a character, it was actually me. And it didn't make people uncomfortable. So that was, yes, to answer your question in a long-winded way, It was in my first job, but it wasn't like all of a sudden an epiphany that happened on camera one day. It was a process that took years.
Was there anyone who inspired you? Anyone whose style you admired that you were trying to somehow partially emulate?
Yeah, I wanted to be Bryant Gumbel.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, I wanted to be Brian Gumbel, and then there was Max Robinson, but there were all these, and Peter Jennings. Peter Jennings was so smooth, like just the words that flowed out of his mouth. It was just like, I was like, wow, this guy's amazing. And Max Robinson was just this, professional, good-looking, just sort of, if you open the encyclopedia, and saw Anchorman, he would be next to it, and he was a black guy. And then just Bryant Gumbel was just for me was just the end all be all. The way he would lead that Today Show in the morning and just so natural. He wasn't trying to be an anchorman. He's like, "Hello, welcome in, to today on this Monday, June, whatever, 1990, 80, whatever, what. So good to have you here and just talk to you." And I was like, I want to be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, and guess what? Now I'm good friends with Bryant Gumbel. Kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. I've dreamt about being him and then envied him and wanted to be him. And then all of a sudden, now he and his wife are very good friends of mine.
Well, is it fair to say that over the years, as you came into your own, you also became somewhat of a lightning rod?
A monster? No, I'm kidding.
But you do seem to like playing, or it appears that you like to play the provocateur, if you will. Is that true?
I don't like to play the provocateur. That's just who I am.
Mm.
Um, and I'm a lightning rod because I will confront and tackle any subject. I will confront and tackle any power structure,
Hmm.
and I am open and willing to have any conversation. The thing is that I have to remember sometimes, which my friend who was my boss said, who was my boss, who is now my friend said, I often wanted when I was your boss, I wanted to give you a sign on the desk that would light up and say, "Remember, you're on television." Because I'm no different sitting here as I'm sitting in my family room now
Hmm.
than I am, when I'm sitting behind an anchor desk. And
Hmm.
and it's a blessing and a curse. So have I been a lightning rod? Yes. Was that something that I wanted to be? No, it just happens to be who I am. And sometimes I'm just a contrarian, and I play devil's advocate just to foster conversation and understanding.
Hmm.
Uh, and not everybody, I think I'm too real sometimes for people.
Well, no, look, I mentioned how I had interviewed Kara Swisher, and it seems to me, Don, that you and Kara share, and I'm trying to think of the right phrasing here. This self acceptance, or maybe a term is like a strong internal compass, in the sense that you don't care what others think. Be yourself. Ask what you want to ask. Say what's on your mind, and let the cards fall where they may. Is that fair?
Yeah, I do. I don't really, I'd never, that's one of the main pieces of advice that I give to students. I talk to students a lot. They will
Mm-hmm.
ask me either if it's a talk at a university or college, or if they'll see me and they go, "Oh my God, I've watched you since I'm growing up." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I feel so old." And one is just to be yourself and don't care about what other people think about you. I mean, does it really matter what other people think about you? It actually does not
Hmm.
at all. It has no effect on your life. And so that and work hard. I always say work hard, aspire to be excellent, and don't care what people think about you. Just do you. So, yeah. And I'm confident about who I am. I believe that conversations should be messy. And it's okay for them to be messy. And I think when they're too sanitized and people try so hard not to offend or to say the wrong thing, that nothing ever gets accomplished. It's a fake conversation. And I see now, on a lot of especially the morning shows and even other shows, that they've just become promotional vehicles, either to sell products or to sell books or to sell movies or to whatever.
Hmm.
And no one wants to offend. Everyone is so risk averse. And it's like, why, like, as we are taping this.
Hmm.
The conversation that happened with Ta-Nehisi Coates and Tony DeCopel on CBS. Are you aware of that?
Hmm.
Right. And I was like, wow, that was a great conversation. Why is everyone getting so bent out of shape about it? Was it a little messy? Yes. Were there some things that could be viewed as insulting or someone went too far over the line? Yeah. So, so what? And I mean, it's great for Tony as a journalist to challenge, to have the, do you know what, to challenge someone in that space, especially in a morning situation, which I know people are like, oh my God, in the morning, people are just not ready. That's bullshit. And then for Tanahasi to also challenge him right back, and I think to educate him in the moment, I think it was great. And also, I would love to have that sort of controversy for my book. So when you go on a show like that and you're promoting a book, the last thing you want is everybody to agree with you and to have this sort of sterile conversation about, because that's not going to sell any books. What's going to sell a book is like, whoa, what the hell did Ta-Nehisi write about that has people so bent out of shape? I'm going to go buy his book. So I welcome that, and I think we need a lot more of it. We need a lot more people who are honest about where we are in politics. We need a lot more people who are honest about the candidates. We need a lot more people who are not, who don't believe in false equivalency, in media. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's just who I am naturally, and I think
Yeah.
that we need more of it.
Well, I think you came out gay publicly upon the publishing of your memoir in 2011.
Hmm.
So, if my math is right, I think you were 45 at the time.
2011. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So, I'm assuming that, as by the way, I do think you're incredibly authentic and you are yourself, but I assume there must have been this period of time because that's pretty late, if you will, to come out. You must have been somewhat concerned about what perceptions might be had you come out earlier. So just wanted to get your thoughts on why then? Why did you wait that long? And what was happening in your life, in your career, that you chose that moment to come out?
I'm glad you mentioned my age. You brought my age up. 2011, I was 45 years old. The reason, and I'll answer your question. The reason is because I got so much, and I still do. People who don't understand who I am or where I come from, how hard I work to get to where I am. Because when I got to CNN, I was, in my early 40s, and people thought I was 20. And they're like, ah, look, this is an affirmative action hire. They hired the black guy because, and they didn't realize that I had worked in, what, five, whatever, markets, local markets. And then I had already worked for network news at NBC.
Hmm.
But they thought I was this kid with no experience in that, DEI. They didn't say it then, but they
Mhm.
were like, they called it an affirmative action hire. But so to answer your question, yeah, I had consternation about doing that, about coming out, because 20, if you look at 2011, that's like a lifetime ago, considering where we are now and the things that have changed. That's before marriage equality passed. That's before it basically anybody else was out, especially in national media in any sense. And so I thought I was gonna, lose my livelihood, perhaps, lose viewers, that I would be criticized, into oblivion, and that I would, want to go tuck my tail and run. And I did, a lot of that did happen. Not that I didn't lose my job, but the criticism and all of that, and with the homophobia and the racism that is often, the criticism of me is often, steeped in homophobia and racism. Um, I I gained a sense of autonomy that I don't think I would have gained had I not done what I did.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes you have to let the world catch up with you. And so I think I was a little bit ahead of my time, but I think the world has caught up with me for the most part. Just as the world has caught up with some of the things that initially people were taken aback by when I said them on television, when I said them out loud, the quiet part out loud. And then all of a sudden, the world catches up, and people go, "Well, that wasn't such a big deal at all," and perhaps maybe he was right about it. But then, through that, I've have suffered the consequences, and I've taken the arrows, And you realize that if you are, I'm not calling myself this, but if you are going to blaze any sort of trail, that's the whole thing. That's the whole point of blazing a trail. There is no roadmap for you. And so with that, you got to do a lot of digging. You have to clear a lot of brush. You have to build a roadway, and then, the other folks will follow along your path and they'll eventually catch up.
Hmm. You were fired from CNN in April 2023.
So technically, let me just say this. I mean, technically, look, you can call it what you want. I say firing, but if you ask CNN, they'll tell you they didn't fire me. They'll say, I had a clause in my contract, which everyone has. It's called pay or play. They can do it with any person there. They can say, we're going to pay you, but we're not going to play you, right? Which means they're not going to put me on television, which essentially means what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
they will say that. So yes, for all intents and purposes, I was let go, but still they had to pay me
I
out.
got it. I got it. Well, there's plenty people can go and research on what happened, and it's essentially one of the situations where you, being yourself, said some things that somehow got taken maybe out of context or either misinterpreted or just somehow there was too much backlash and you became a casualty. So I don't want to revisit that, but what I am curious about is you've spoken openly about falling into a deep depression
Mhm.
following that. Let's just say the end of your services at CNN. So, Don, are we talking like a clinical depression or more like a deep funk?
It was more of a deep funk, and it was also catching myself before I went into the part where that makes you immobile, right? And what I realized in that process was that it was okay for me to feel whatever it was that I was feeling. Because for anybody who had experienced what I had experienced, especially in such a public way,
Mm-hmm.
would go through something, right? And would go through either depression or a resentment or anger or whatever, the stages of grief. And so I realized that what I was dealing with was extraordinary and unusual for anyone. And that I needed to have someone guide me through. And I was lucky enough to have a therapist, and then I leaned into that.
Mm-hmm.
And then not long after that, a little bit after that, the things that I loved to do started to feel dull. I started not to get pleasure from, taking beautiful vacations and trips, being with my fiance at the time. I love to go boating. That's like my thing. Like when I'm out on a boat, it's like the world, who cares, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everything is over. So that's my happy place. Those things, cooking, being with my family. Like last night, I cooked this really great lasagna soup, like, and that gives me pleasure, right? It's therapy for me. So those things started to feel dull. And so as when that happened, I said, I got to do something about it. I told my therapist, and my therapist said, you should do an antidepressant. And I'm like, nah, I've done that before. I'm good. I can handle it. And so, still as we started to do our our sessions, and then you do the assessments of where you are on this scale, whatever. And he said, you're still not dealing with because you're saying you're not getting much joy out of things. And he said, I think you should do an antidepressant. And I was like, no. So I refused it. And then I said, I don't want to do that. And he goes, Don, I really think you should do it. It's up to you. And he knew I was writing this book about God. And he said, but the Lord helps those who help themselves. And I said, you got me. Darn it. And I went on antidepressants, and almost immediately, Glenn, the life came back in Technicolor,
Hmm.
in high definition, the way it was. And I realized, like, hey, my life is pretty good. There's something good will come out of this, and something good is already coming out of this. And you have to have that faith, and you have to trust in God, and you have to trust in the universe. The God or the universe or whatever it is has taken care of you already for this long. What makes you think it's not going to do it in the future? Continue to do that. And I mean, it was like it just sort of clicked
Hmm.
like that. So, and that's not to say that I don't have tough days. It's not to say that, what happened to me was fair or I liked what happened to me. I didn't. But one has to deal with what you have to deal with and move on, and
Mm,
then handle it the best way that you can. So
yeah,
it wasn't like a deep depression where I was like suicidal. It was like a deep funk. And
yeah.
I always believe that I believe I should say that I've always had a sort of low grade depression in my life,
Hmm.
simply because of hiding being gay, having
Sure.
a secret, racism, that sort of thing. And I think so. I feel it's always been there.
Hmm. I think a few years before that, 2018, I think, is when you lost your sister, Lisa.
Yes, sir.
The two of you were pretty close, I take it.
We were pretty close, growing up, really close. She's kind of taught me how to be an adult, right? She kind of, she would take me to clubs. I would drive her car. I would handle her bills. We would buy clothes together, that sort of thing. And yes, and then as we got older, we were close. She would visit, we would talk, but not as close as when we were young. I just think that was just part of being in different cities halfway across the country
Mm-hmm.
and life. So, I mean, we were close in heart and spirit, and we talked often, we spoke often, but not as close as when we were young.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. And it still hit you really hard.
Oh my gosh. That doesn't mean that my love for her diminished. I just think like in proximity and seeing each other almost every day and of course living in the same house and then in the same city after we became adults, but we didn't live in the same city.
Oh, I get it. I think your first instinctual response was to question your faith,
Yes.
to ask how in the world could God let something like this happen. And I lost my mom when I was in college, and I went through the same experience. So, for some people, death of a loved one is essentially an exit ramp for any kind of organized religion. And somehow you found your way back. Why?
Well, I think that I mean, what's the alternative? I mean, I don't want to sound crass. I mean, I told this to
The alternative is to be an atheist.
yeah, the alternative is to be an atheist. But the alternative is also for me, I believe it's to let go of some of my core values, which doesn't mean that I can't change my mind as new information arises or comes about. But I think that I have my core values that I always carry with me, that I'll always believe. So while people may change and sort of become malleable to the situations that they're in or what's expedient for them, I don't do that. So it would be really easy for me to say, oh, there is no God and there's no this and there's no that. When I think, more productive way for me and the more evolutionary way for me, and hang on to that word evolution,
Hmm.
for me is to question and to try to figure out deeply rather than jumping to conclusions about, well, there isn't this and there isn't that. And if there, because I thought about all those things and I questioned, I said, hey, why would God take my sister who was thriving and who had, grandkids that she loved and she went to every game and every pageant and every, parent teacher day and she had these beautiful daughters who she was very proud of and this her husband who she loved. Why would, God do that? Why would a loving God do that? And so did I question whether there is a God? No, yes, of course I did. And that's what the book is about, my search for God in America. I had a crisis of faith. But in that whole idea about evolution, the whole idea of life is to continue to question and to continue to move on, right? Is because otherwise it's antithetical to what I believe the world is about and what faith is about. It's not about stopping and cutting off belief or cutting off life. The alternative that I say to myself and to my mom is that, hey, my sister's dead, your daughter's dead, but you're not. You're still here. You're still living. So we have to figure out how to move on. And at this moment, I will choose to be thankful to God that I am still here to move on to figure out what to do next. And I believe whether that's, me just wanting to believe that somehow this faith that I have I will continue to have a connection with my sister, although it's not physical. But at some point, I do believe that I will. again. And if I don't, that's okay too.
Hmm.
Sounds weird, huh? At least I'm lucky enough and I was blessed enough that somehow God put me in the same, in this world, in this realm at the same time as that beautiful spirit. And so I will just be grateful for that.
Okay. Okay. Speaking of moving on career wise, when I ask you about X, and I don't know what you're able to talk about or not, so I'll ask the question that you can tell me what you feel comfortable sharing. So the plan was to start your own show in X, of course, formerly Twitter. It wasn't something that you decided to do overnight. It took a lot of maybe soul searching and reflection to finally decide to say what the hell and do it. And I think after one single interview with Elon Musk, who of course owns X, again, whether the term is not fire, technically you didn't work for him, but the contract was terminated. There would be no further use of your services, if you will, whatever the right framing is. And first of all, for whatever it's worth, it is so bizarre to me. And I knew Elon Musk very casually back when I was in Silicon Valley back in the day. He's not the same person, but one of the wealthiest and arguably, like it or not, one of the most influential people in the world has such a fragile ego that he would do something like that just because they may not be comfortable with the line of questioning. Um, but then again, while it's sort of bizarre, it's not really surprising just knowing who he is. So what I was just curious about is, were you surprised at the reaction? Not you agree with it, but were you surprised?
Well, let's just say, obviously, I'm in active litigation with him, so there's only so much that I can talk
Uh
about. But
huh.
I've already said that I was surprised and disappointed at his reaction. And so, look, I went in with an honest intention to do exactly what I set out to do with X or Twitter. And I've been very transparent about what that was and what he asked for publicly, which was to come on the platform and try to offer some balance to a platform that was and still is considered to be sort of a right wing platform.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my intention, and that was our agreement. And he reacted the way he reacted. And was I surprised? Yeah. Was I disappointed? Yes. But you know, it happened, and now I'm in litigation.
Yeah.
Let's see what
Yeah.
happens.
Do you, looking back at your career, and I know it's far from over, any regrets? Anything, if you could go back in time and change something you did, something you said, even something you felt, something you would have handled differently with 2020 hindsight vision, anything you would change?
I don't have any regrets because I think some things are just meant to happen. Would I sort of explain some things that would, yes, but I felt that way before. Like, I remember back in 2013, I got a bunch of criticism about, offering some advice to the Black community, right? And people were all outraged and, oh my gosh, they should fire Don and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, everyone has come around and said, you know what, he was right. Even now, and so people will write about it as if it's something bad, and then I try not to go into the comments, and then people of all different ethnicities, and especially people of color, will go, okay, where's the lie? There's no lie in that. And I was like, wow, it's so interesting to see how people reacted back in 2013 and 2014 to this. And when they said that I wasn't black and that I was, and now they're like, he's right. Okay. The same thing about when I said the biggest terror threat to this country were white men radicalized to the right, right? Because it is these sort of right-wing neo-Nazi, whatever. Look at Charlottesville. Look at those.
Sure.
That's who it is, right? And then everyone, oh, you should fire him, whatever. And then, a couple weeks later, Christopher Wray came out and said the same thing. And so, he must be a racist to say something like that. And the whole point of it was, when I said it, is that Donald Trump at the time said he wanted to have a Muslim ban in the country because the Muslims were too dangerous for America. And my whole point was that, well, well, why isn't there a white guy ban? Because our number one terror threat is not foreign terror, it's domestic terror. And that's according to all the facts and statistics that we have. And who's a part of that group? And so everyone, and then now I was proven right. So somehow, whatever people may think that I have said or whatever when I was at CNN, I do believe that I will have the last word again. And so, I mean, I think I always want my language and my conversation to be precise because that is my stock in trade. And so, if anything, I would make sure that my language was, maybe a little bit more clear, a little clearer. But would I go back and change anything? No, not at all, because you never know where something is going to take you. And if you believe that you're right in what you're saying, and if you're doing it not from a place of malice, then I think it's okay. But there isn't much that I would change. I mean, if I could go back and change time and not, have my sister not die, okay, that I would do that. But if I could go back in time and have my father not die, okay, I would do that, or my stepdad or my grandmother, I could. But you know, life goes on.
Yeah. Well, that's looking back. If you look forward a year, 5 years, 10 years, it feels from the outside looking in like you sort of reached, when I say a peak, I mean in a very positive sense, Don, like you have mastered this craft. You were on CNN for years and years and years with your own show. You've got your own show once again. When you think about the craft of
Mhm.
what you do, is there more evolution to you that you'd like to play out over time? Are there things you like to experiment with? How do you think about where do you, beyond just capturing audience, in terms of you and how you come across and how you do what you do? Do you have sort of aspirations of what you'd like to do that maybe you're not quite there yet?
Well, listen, two things. Yes, I do, and no, I don't.
Okay.
One is that one must be open. Must have an open mind, open heart, and an open attitude, right? And to let life take you where it wants to take you. Because they say, what is it? Life is what happens when you're making plans or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a big part of me as someone who is spiritual and a person of faith is like, okay, wherever life takes me, that's what I'm going to go. And I'm not going to fight it so much, right? But the other thing that I would like to do is to I would love for this production company that I have and for this show to really sort of be a beacon of truth. Because in the spaces that we're going to, but the
Mm-hmm.
spaces that I happen to be in, I have this incredible vast experience or knowledge about traditional corporate media, right? And journalism, with a capital J. So I
Mm-hmm.
have that. And now I'm moving into this place where there are no editorial rigors or standards, where you can basically say and do whatever you want. And that is contributing, I believe, to a lot of the misinformation and a lot of the apathy that people have about our world, about our politics, and about, quite frankly, who they would like to see as president. And so I would like to be able, at least, to be able to offer to bring some truth to that without, hyperbole or hysteria or whatever. And so it's an interesting place for me to be in now and to see what's happening and who is successful in these spaces. I would like to be able to be successful in the spaces where we are going and to be an example for others who, come behind me.
Okay. Well, we will wrap with this. I wrap every show. The art of excellence is this podcast. That word excellence, I like to have my guests define what it means to them. How do you think about the word?
That's so funny. I didn't even think about it when I said my advice to students is just to be excellent. Did
Oh,
you
I
catch?
heard. Oh, I certainly did catch it. Absolutely.
Aspire to be excellent. I didn't even think about it. So what does excellent mean to me? So here's what excellence means to me. People think that excellent means that you have to be perfect, right? That you have to be at the top of your craft or at least in a visible place where everyone thinks that you're the king of the world and on top of it. That's not what excellence is. Excellence is incorporating your everything into your life, where it's all incorporated, where you are a good citizen, you are a good partner, you're a good family member, and you are a good contributor to society and the world. But more importantly, excellence. is not about perfection. Perfection is boring. And the one thing that I have realized is that if you want to be successful in life, is that you have to realize that nothing or no one is perfect. So don't aspire to be perfect. Just aspire to be excellent and good. So excellence is sort of the aspiration of just being you and being a good citizen of the world, regardless of your profession, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad or the president of the United States.
Yeah, I'll take it. This has been a pleasure I can't describe. I love the book. I read the prior book as well, more focused on race. This one a little more around religion, but they're both really interesting. They're very thought provoking, and I found you very open about, I think, your own struggles with it and finding your way. So hopefully others will read it and get as much out of it as I did. Don, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to hear this back.
You and me both.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. You be well, okay?
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, here's my ask of you. First, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Second, tell a friend. Better yet, share it with all your friends and contacts on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Honestly, wherever you hang out online is fine with me. Please leave me a review if you could on iTunes or Spotify or both. The reviews really do help. And finally, try to find one takeaway from this episode that you can apply to your own life. Commit to trying something, anything. As the saying goes, no harm in trying. I leave you with this one question. How do you define the word excellence?